Good evening and welcome to the Grace Talk. I am Gloria Godson and thank you for joining us. Today we are continuing with a conversation that we started last week on racism, bias, and prejudice in America. Now, this conversation is very important. Why are we doing this? Because we want to promote understanding. We want to promote empathy. We want to promote dialogue. And we want to seek credible solutions and build bridges. We all can agree that change is needed in America, but it's up to you and I to make change happen. How can we do that? By dialogue and partnership. Partnership across racial lines and partnership and dialogue with the police to look for solutions that work. Last week, we started by asking ourselves 4 questions. Question number 1, how can this be happening in America in 2020? 2, what is the solution? Number 3, how can I be a part of that solution? And number 4, how can we stop this from happening again? Once again, we have an incredible panel to address this issue. But before we do that, we want to invite you, our audience, to please engage with us. Ask questions, make comments, join the conversation. We want your voice to be heard. And thank you to the so many people who have sent in questions to us. In fact, I got another set of questions just before we got on this show. So thank you. Keep the questions coming. This type of dialogue is exactly what we need to get to the solutions that we want. So let's introduce our panel in alphabetical order. Dave Carey, who is a best-selling author, speaker, educator, and vice president in several Fortune 100 companies. Hi, Dave. Welcome to the show. Andre Davis, former professional football player who played 9 years in the NFL and is currently the director of student athlete support and community engagement at Virginia Tech. Louis Fevrin, who is the owner of the Louis Fevrin Insurance Agency. Tim Godson, who is a local entrepreneur. Bob Lewis, who is a manager at a large local company. Jason O'Neill, 25-year IT professional, leader in the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Delaware, and co-founder, director, and national advisor of Catholics of the Cross. And joining us by phone is Brandon Steele, who is a worship minister. Now, gentlemen, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having us.
This week, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote an op-ed in LA Times, and he said something that really struck a chord with me. He said that racism is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the light in. And then you see that it's everywhere. As long as you keep shining the light, then we have a chance of cleaning it up. But you must continue to shine the light. And you must continue to be diligent because it's still always in the air. And that's why we're continuing this dialogue today, and we'll continue again next week. In fact, next week, we're working to see whether we can get some police officers to join in this conversation because their voice needs to be included as well. So plan to tune in. Last week, we started with stories of the panel members. And today, I want us to hear again one story from one of our panel members, Tim Godson. Tim, go ahead and share your story.
So I went to the University of Delaware, and this story is about 10 years old now. So the fall semester of my freshman year, I was coming home to my dorm room from West Campus. So if anyone's familiar with University of Delaware campus, that's kind of like the Rodney and Dickinson area. And I was going toward North Campus, which is where the Marriott is, the hotels towards that area. And it was late at night, and I was by myself. And as I'm walking home on New London Road, I kind of see like a pickup truck kind of coming towards me as I'm walking on the sidewalk. And it's like a big blue pickup truck, with kind of, big four-wheeler. And there's a bunch of rowdy white guys in there. And as I'm walking down the street, I kind of hear them, kind of taunting at me, kind of saying different things, saying, using the N-word, and just, kind of being belligerent, trying to get a reaction out of me. And me just being by myself, late at night, I'm not trying to, escalate the situation. So I just kind of keep my head down and keep walking, and kind of, hopefully, they just keep driving on by. And the thing about this, again, like, it was late at night, there was no one on the road, there's no one within earshot. So a car passes me by, and it stops at the intersection. But instead of kind of going, about their way, they kind of double back. At this point is when I kind of start to get concerned because, there's no one out there on the road. There's no one within earshot. And there's four guys, in a pickup truck, shouting at me, they're saying, where's your girl, nigger? They're saying this and that. They're just being very belligerent, trying to whatever they can to get a reaction out of me. They call me gay. They call me all types of things. They're spilling beer on me, from the window. And they're kind of, as I'm walking down, they kind of come to a crawl. So, as they're kind of taunting me. And, me, I'm just at this point thinking of, what's the worst case scenario that can happen right now, because there's no way I can really, to fight them off or defend myself. They're in a car, I can be taken to, who knows where. So, and me, I just know that I'm just trying to get to my dorm and just get home safely. So I know they're trying to antagonize me, trying to get a reaction out of me. So my main focus is to, just keep my head down and keep peaceful and not try to escalate the situation. And just kind of keep an eye on just seeing how many there were and just what was going on. Thankfully, nothing really came of it beyond that. I wasn't, physically harmed other than, some beer in my face or what have you and some insults. But that situation really just kind of, unfortunately, highlighted to me how prevalent this is. Those guys are definitely college students. I was a freshman at the time. Maybe they were, seniors or juniors or whatever. So it's just, and that was kind of a glaring reality. This is like 2011. So this is kind of, before, Trayvon Martin or any of these things had really happened in society. So it was kind of a jarring revelation to me as far as, how far we still have to go and, and kind of the unfortunate danger that, I could be in at any given time.
Thank you, Tim. For those who are not aware, the young man that just spoke is my son. And every time that I hear that story, because I know that the only thing that saved my son that night was that the God of heaven was watching out for him. Everybody listening to me, you've heard that story before. Every Black person listening to me you've heard this story before. A young Black man walking along by himself, white man in a pickup truck. I personally know a story like that when we lived in Houston, Texas. The exact same situation. And the young white man grabbed this Black man, tied him to the back of a truck, and dragged him until his head fell off. The only thing that saved my son that night was because there's a God in heaven who sees and who hears and who answers prayer. And the thing is, this did not happen in the Deep South. It's right here in the University of Delaware. And this is just one story of other stories that he has of racial incidents, not just with students, but also with the police. This is why we have to have this conversation. Some of the things that chills me to my bones is that those young men, they're now in the society, they're working somewhere, they're living somewhere in the neighborhood. And just like Derek Chauvin, they look like all American fine people until they have an opportunity to attack or harm a Black person. We share that story every time, not because, and I know it makes people uncomfortable. This is the first time we're sharing this story publicly. Most Black people don't talk about these things. You just internalize it and you move forward. but we're sharing this story so that you can hear these are real experiences. You know, Andre shared his story last week, and you're hearing a different story, different flavor, different state, different circumstances, but the same underlying cause of racism and prejudice. Gentlemen, we're going to dive into our questions today. And again, our audience, please keep your comments coming. Now, there are allegations in the Black community about white privilege. Do you believe that this exists? And if so, how is it impacting our society? Dave, I can ask you to start.
Sure. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be on this panel. TJ, I'm sorry that you went through that here where we live. And I can't, being a white person, it's just very difficult to hear things like this. You know, I can experience the shock and anger, and I can see things from my perspective, but it'd be untruthful for me to say that I've experienced similar things as you. And that right there shows a divide, that there's something that is not right, something that is, there's a disconnect somewhere. So speaking about white privilege, yeah, white privilege exists. You can see it in our educational system. You can see where inner city schools are not funded the same as schools that are in the suburbs. You can see it in the police, where people of color are treated as suspicious. In the instance of Philando Castile, he was approached by pulled over by a police officer. The gun was drawn first, and then they started asking questions. And in that situation, he was shot and he was killed in his car. He was unarmed. He was shot in front of his girlfriend and in front of his 4-year-old child. So yeah, there is a lot of division that is out there, and there's a lot of things that need to be corrected. So is there white privilege? Yeah, absolutely. It does exist.
Thank you, Dave. I would ask you to chime in there, Louis. Do you think that there's white privilege? And how does it impact our society?
Absolutely, there's white privilege. What I find interesting about the topic of white privilege is the change in narrative today. They want to say that there's no white privilege because, oh, it's as if white folks don't work hard. But that's not what white privilege is. White privilege is not about whether you work hard or not. Obviously, you work hard. Nobody can go anywhere in this country without working hard. If you're successful, you have to work hard for it. It's just that simple. In this country, you have to work hard, period. What we're saying with white privilege is you can work hard, I can work hard. The difference is you don't have an additional barrier preventing you from being successful. That's what white privilege really is about. It's about that barrier that as a minority, I face an additional hurdle. I could be doing the exact same thing as you are. I could be getting the exact same grades as you are. I could be working just as hard as you are, but the door is going to open for you while that door will shut for me. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about white privilege. It's not the fact that you're being late, that you're lazy, that is just given to you because of the fact that you're white. That's far from the truth. The difference is you can work for it and earn it freely, while I have to work hard for it and go through an additional hoop to earn it. It's not as freely given to me. My hard work isn't, rewarded the same way your hard work is rewarded. And that's really how it impacts the society.
Thank you, Lois. I'll ask you to chime in there. Jason, what are your thoughts around white privilege in America?
I agree there is white privilege. You see it also in the media portrayed, particularly when you deal with law enforcement and the judicial system. You're seeing folks that those who are white who tend to have more capabilities to have the attorneys, where those who are or not tend to be public defenders, and usually that results in the outcomes, of the cases. So I would tend to agree that yes. And you see this not only in real life, but you also see it portrayed in the TV shows and movies of today.
Thank you, Jason. I'm going to ask you to chime in there. Andre, what do you think about white privilege in America?
Yeah, I agree with all the gentlemen thus far. I think we all can come up with different examples of what white privilege is. It definitely is the privilege of being able to go through life and not have those secondary questions, asked of you. To be able to go into a store and know that you can just shop freely and not wonder if someone's following you because you look suspicious. To Jason's point, you see it in the media all the time. If someone is accused of something, you see the words that are being used associated with Black people compared to white people. You see it throughout your time, no matter what it is you're doing. If you can afford something, if you're driving a certain level of car, or if you're going somewhere, there's always a second question that comes with whatever you do. So when you see something like that and you see somebody else, walk right by, and you're wondering like, well, wait a sec, you didn't even question that person. And all of a sudden, you realize like, all right, I got it, And so I think for many of us as Black people, we've seen that. We have literally learned how to adjust to that in our lives. And it has become something that almost you have to tell your children about. It's almost an education of, this is why you have to work harder. This is why you have to be aware that if you're the only Black kid along with white friends, here's how you have to act differently if you see something happening, because you'll be pulled out and they won't. Whether they're doing it purposely or not, if kids are caught doing something they shouldn't be doing, they're inherently going to look at the one Black child and not the white kid. So I think we've all agreed that, it definitely is something that's there. It's something that for my white brothers and sisters, it's something to just understand what it is. It's when you can understand it, then you'll understand easier what you need to do to ensure that you don't try to take advantage of those things, but you try to say, you bring those things to light and you do what you can to make the changes.
Thank you. Bob, I'm going to come to you and ask you what your thoughts are around this issue.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, the company I work for is very diverse. And I've been there such a long time. I haven't had an opportunity to work outside of where I work now. And so where I work, I don't see the white privilege. I think it's pretty equal when it comes to promotions at the company I'm with. But if you read the news and, if you listen to the people that are on this panel that experience it every day, I mean, you have Andre and TJ and those that are experiencing things. So, I mean, I take them at their word. I mean, I personally don't have that experience. I've been interviewed for jobs and lost out to a Black candidate, you know what I mean? And it's just something that, I just can't sit up here and say, yes, I've seen it, but there's definitely outside of the workforce. I mean, it's quite obvious there's white privilege. I mean, I mentioned it last week. I can drive my illegally tinted Black windows on my SUV for the last 3 weeks and nobody's blinked an eye at me in Wilmington where I work. But you take somebody of African-American driving around in the same vehicle at 9 o'clock at night, guess who's getting pulled over? That car. So in that instance, there's absolutely disparaged treatment for sure. And the schooling, like Dave Carey said, there's definitely, we tried the busing thing. I can remember it in 6th grade, and that wasn't too long ago, kids, my friends standing in the middle of Basin Road holding up signs that were not pretty about not wanting to have the kids from Wilmington to come to our schools. And it was not that long ago. But, that's pretty much my experience when it comes to that. But it's definitely something we all need to work on. And I'll just elaborate a little bit. We can change all the laws we want. We hold up all the signs we want. But if you don't allow God to change you from the inside to the outside, it's not going to work. We can make all the laws we want. We can have all the cops arrested, but that's not going to change the 100 people that are outside looking in saying, oh, well, here we go again. If they don't change from the inside out, we'll just continue this path.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Tim, I would ask you to chime in there. Have you seen white privilege, and what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, I would say white privilege definitely exists. It's definitely a thing. The way I kind of phrase it is that it's kind of like the benefit of the doubt. White people are often given the benefit of the doubt in a lot of situations where they're not, the motives aren't questioned. They're just being somewhere isn't questioned. And like was stated earlier, white privilege isn't necessarily invalidating someone's work ethic or even the many obstacles that they've had to face, or if they rose in poverty or what have you. It's just saying that in society, you're given the benefit of the doubt to advance without suspicion, without prejudice, without judgment, and also kind of the privilege to not care about these things, to the privilege of indifference, to the privilege to kind of learn about racism instead of experiencing it. So all these things are different elements of privilege. I think in the workforce, there's meritocracy, what have you, but if you look at throughout society, how pervasive it could be, with education, with the list goes on and on. It's definitely something that that needs to be addressed, and something that can be utilized as a platform for advocacy and change.
Thank you, Tim. Brandon, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good. Oh, wow. Finally, we get to see you too. Awesome. So go ahead and chime in there. Do you have any thoughts around this issue?
So yes, I mean, I definitely agree. I think my experience is very rare compared to a lot of people. I've come from a mixed home, where my whole family is we're very combined and racist. So, but kind of being an adult and being alive and caring about our day, I think there's definitely experiences that I have encountered because of my skin color. Now, the way I was raised was know who you are, and by that, you know whose you are. So a lot of things that, I'm sure that I have encountered that really could have maybe rubbed the wrong way, or maybe I could have seen it a different way. I might not have always recognized it, but there are experiences that I have encountered, even recently, that definitely makes sense on what's prevalent here and now today. But again, I agree with Bob. I believe that, the real way to make changes is through the heart, and the heart following after God, and that everyone, being on the same mission and goal and mindset of being in the obedience of the Father, because we cannot fight a natural ability to a supernatural, attack. And but I guess to answer that would be, yes, I think things are prevalent here today.
Thank you. And gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let me dive into the next question, which is some people kind of, look for other narratives, competing narratives, to justify or to excuse or to, just to deflect in situations like this. Things like, what did the person do? Or they can point to Black on Black crime, which we know is also very prevalent. Do you think, what are your thoughts about that narrative or that approach to solving this issue? To say, hey, Black people commit crimes against Black people, so does that make it okay? Louis, I think I saw you scratching yourself. Maybe you can start.
I always laugh because, first off, the whole Black on Black crime, there's white on white crime. If you're in a white neighborhood that's predominantly poor, there's a high increase of crime. Crime is usually correlates with, income. So if you have a poor white neighborhood, there's plenty of white on white crime. It's just, look, there's a correlation there. So the fact that majority of Blacks, because of the systems that they're put in, are in low income areas, yes, there's a reason for a large crime rate, where hence Black on Black crime stereotype is put, but this white on white crime is just as prevalent. So it's just ridiculous to talk about that. But to answer that question, the truth can be looked at two different ways. You could look at it from a Christian point of view and say, okay, let's look at what officers did. Did they follow God's principle? What did God really want us to do? Is the answer to that is to love one another the way he's loved you. Is that love? If you're a Christian, this is really simple. Is that love? You make that decision right there, because that really is going to say everything anybody needs to know about whether you really are a Christian or not. Is that love? Then we can look at it from a constitutional point of view, because everybody likes to throw out the Constitution and everything like that. The Constitution dictates that even if this guy was a serial killer, he has the right to be judged amongst his peers in the court of law. And the truth is, we've seen serial killers like Roof, who had weapons that just finished killed multiple people. So you know this person was armed. Yet the police didn't feel threatened by him. Didn't feel threatened to the fact that they fed him because he was thirsty and hungry. But when it's a Black person, the narrative is, oh, I felt threatened, as if that's justification. I'm sorry. I have never heard of firemen saying, I couldn't go into that building, I was scared. He'd be crucified. He'd be crucified. You're supposed to be brave. You're a fireman. Same thing with a police officer. You're supposed to be brave. I don't want to hear that you're afraid. Don't do the job. Because there's other situations where armed men were protesting and yelling in your face and you're pretty calm. So why is it when a Black person is in front of you, you're afraid? What is it that makes every Black person terrifying?
Thank you, Louis. Thank you for your thoughts. Reverend Dave, I saw you shaking your head vigorously at some point there. So chime in.
Yeah, no, I agree with Louis. It's a demographic situation. Sure, I totally get that. But I do want to say that the individuals who make excuses are actually distracting from the real issue at hand. They're enabling a racist sentiment to thrive. And the true issue is actually pushed to the sidelines, and that's not fair. There's no justifying the actions of what these officers did, the recent situation with these officers. And so we have to actually create solutions and promote solutions, such as pointing out racism when it actually happens. And we need to address the problem head on versus making excuses for those who perpetuate that problem.
Thank you, Dave. Are you still there? Can you hear?
Yeah, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You kind of had a little ping there. Okay, I will transition to you, Andrea, and ask you to chime in there.
Yeah, I think to Dave's point and Lewis's point, I think so oftentimes when people deflect, it's because they don't want to deal with the real issues. And I think the media has done that. And we're seeing it directly right now, again, once again, in the sports arena. We're coming back to this issue of what Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for back in 2016. You know, this is 4 years ago that he did this. And even in the midst of that time, how many people were against him? We're seeing 4 years later that if we would have heeded to his call for us to look into police brutality, we may not be dealing with some of these issues that we're dealing with right now. And you saw as a nation, as we're all starting to be more aware of what is going on right now, that even a Christian man in Drew Brees still was thinking the same thing from back then. And you saw what has kind of happened to him in the media. And, you know, I hate to say it, but even the president of the United States right now, President Trump, chimed in and deflected from the narrative again, trying to say it's about kneeling when it was never about kneeling. It was about bringing awareness to police brutality. And so you can tell when people don't want to talk about an issue is that they're always going to deflect to something else. So I think it's our job, once again, to continue to bring true awareness. A lot of these times it has to be the conversations. You have to have conversations with people, because it's not until those times that you realize you've been thinking this way all along, like you still don't understand. And when you're left to stay in your home by yourself and just not talk with anybody and not talk with other people who look like the people who are being oppressed, if you're not getting their opinions on things, then you're in your own world and you really don't want to know. That really is ignorance. I used to want to use the word as naive to a lot of my brothers and sisters, but in actuality, it's willful ignorance that you don't want to know the truth and you don't want to sit and listen to the stories of those people who have been oppressed and those who continue to be oppressed. And for us to tell you, no, this is what we are saying. You have to listen to what we are saying. Don't assume you know what we're saying. We're telling you what is happening. And I think now, hopefully, is the time that people will actually sit up and listen and really join what's going on.
Thank you, Andre. Absolutely. That is true talk there. Bob, chime in there. What are your thoughts about deflecting? Weather is deflecting and talking about a different issue. And some other people also deflecting, saying, look at what's going on. They're burning down buildings. They're burning down cars. So talk to us about that question of deflection.
It's not easy for me to sit here and really going to say what I'm going to say because I'm putting myself out there. But I was that guy, that would, to watch the Baltimore riots. And I was that guy that would say, I don't understand why they're so mad about this, but why aren't they mad about black on black crime? And, why aren't they rioting and looting for black on black crime? I was that guy. And until people can really be comfortable and just come out and like to hear myself say it, I'm very comfortable saying it because that's not the person I am now. It's definitely nothing I'm proud of, but I was that guy, and there's plenty of people like me still that are watching the TV now saying, I wish they would get more mad if there was more, upset about black on black crime. The difference that I see, and if we're just going to address with the George Floyd thing is, that guy was black and that cop was white. And what that sparked with what I'm feeling it sparked is that just reminds the black community of the brutality that they have suffered at the hands of white people. And it's something that I can't relate to because I'm white. So when I look at it, I don't see a white cop man on a black guy. He did, but I'm not black. So I don't see it that way.
Thank you.
But, until people, one more thing, my son's age 30 and down, I think they're going to be the ones to make the biggest difference in this country. I think that's when you're going to start seeing the big turnaround because I don't see it around my house. I don't see it where I go to work. I don't see my kids' friends. I just don't see the racism part of the world, but I know it's there.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that thought there. And to your point, I personally can share that I was blessed to see, looking at the protesters, that this is not a black or brown protest. This is an American protest. And it gives me hope for the future. It really gives me hope for the future. Jason, chime in there and give us your thoughts. What are your thoughts on deflecting or finding reasons or other narratives when this issue comes up?
Those that deflect, I think, are just missing the issue at hand here of what we're trying to deal with. I'm in IT, so I'm going to give you a quote that I learned from my boss many years ago, who actually is not in the United States, it was overseas. But he goes, stop bringing me problems, start bringing me solutions. And I think those that deflect are looking to mask the problems and throw them under the rug. And I think we are looking at, what we need to start looking at is, what are the systemic causes or situations which allow this to happen again? From my standpoint, and I'm going to get a little deep for a second, is I think we're looking at, from my recollection, and a lot of these instances tend to happen in metropolitan police departments. Now, I'm here in Florida. For those who don't know, I moved out of Delaware because of my job at the end of 2018, and I'm now in a state where we have county sheriffs. The county sheriffs are elected. You do not have that in Delaware or where I was born in New York City. So where you have municipal police departments, which report in through either the mayor or the governor, and where you tend to have those systemic problems through quota systems tend to get masked or exacerbate into some of the situations. whereas a county sheriff is accountable to the people. And I think that is some of the conversations I think we need to be having, and looking at the solutions to some of these problems that we're having, where you have the law enforcement be accountable to the people and not to the administrators, i.e. the mayors or the governors that are running those municipalities or states. And that tend to run them under the problem. And I think that's something we need to take a look at, because these situations are real. We see it time and time again, and nothing is changing. And I think I understand, and this combined with the fact that people have also been under lockdown for the coronavirus, it was a powder keg waiting to happen. And it happened. It probably needed to happen. And, not that for those who are not aware, this is happening. This is not just American, this is international. It's in London, it's in Berlin, it's Hong Kong. They're saying the same thing, and they're supporting the American resolve to address this issue that we have here in the United States on how the police treat people. And that's something we need to take a look at, how we're going to fix this.
Absolutely. Like someone says, when America coughs, the world catches flu. And that's right. I'm reading reports from all across the world. People are really focused on this. And there's a great, hue and cry from all around the world, and solidarity to help Americans get over this. Brandon, I'll ask you to chime in there. What are your thoughts about those who deflect and make it and have different narratives? They feel a need to have a competing narrative whenever you bring this issue up.
Yeah, I think, again, what a lot of people have already said, but I think another portion of that is just simply just being unaware. I know Andre was saying being ignorant or being naive about it, but again, I think that there are people that are just not aware, not necessarily that they don't see it, they choose not to see it. I think just people are in certain different situations, that where they don't encounter a lot of that, or they don't experience it, or because of their skin tone, they've never, physically been through any of that. But I think where it becomes more of a challenge is when things are being presented. And I think, again, more to what Andre was saying, is like, just if you're not wanting to kind of be informed about anything new, you're really not going to be able to get anywhere with anything. But I think it is important just for the awareness and for truth to continue to just be informed, to be put out into the world. So I think it is important for everybody to be aware of what's happening. That way we can make the best decision for it. We can be able to put our best foot forward as a country. But as we're seeing, global protests, I think I saw one from London just earlier this week. And, you think of the news there, we never hear anything really about London, but just the fact that you have, part of essentially the whole globe, really hearing this and really wanted to take a step forward. I think it is a step that is in the right progression, but I think there's still more to be done in a deeper, more heavier weight.
Thank you. Tim, chime in there and close out this issue for us.
Yeah, in regards to a black on black crime, that's not a thing. This is a poverty issue. Black people don't kill other black people because they're black. It's because there's a lack of resources, lack of opportunity. The same as any disenfranchised socioeconomic group. So that's, I think that's that. But going beyond that, I think that people who try to kind of shift that narrative, it's kind of, you have to ask yourself why, and keep asking why you are trying to deflect. What deeper issue are you trying to escape from? Why are you not really trying to address the real issue at hand? Because a lot of times, in regards to what Black people are protesting about, we're being very specific, very direct, and just like Colin Kaepernick was. I'm very specific about what the issue is, and a lot of times people want to kind of shift the narrative or assume or kind of paint their own picture, and instead of kind of being open-minded and listening to, hey, even though I may not experience these things, that doesn't mean they aren't happening. And I have to be open to that and be receptive to that and see how I can be kind of an ally instead of being so staunch in my opinion.
Thank you, Tim. And Jason brought up a point there about, look at participating in where police chiefs are voted, make your vote count, because that's one of the ways that we raise our voices and speak all across. So it's not just a white thing or a black thing. Everybody make your vote count. So many people don't vote except in the national, like presidential elections. But it's these types of local elections that make an impact on this issue.
Can I say one more thing about that? I think when instances, I think what Black people really are mad about, when people are really protesting about, is that, instances when there are Black on Black crime, those people are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. They see the consequences of their actions. And a lot of times on the other end, when there's police brutality, when there's instances of racism, they don't see the consequences of those actions. Oftentimes, there are no consequences for those individuals. And so the lack of equality, lack of a fair playing field is really what kind of has people upset and kind of can incite, some strong feelings.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Tim is saying, ask yourself, why do you feel a need to have a different narrative? What is it that you're trying to deal with or hide or anything like that? Now, let's dive into another question. It's amazing how quickly time flies. This question of stereotypes. How do stereotypes fit into this? We got a question around somebody saying that is really, one of the roots of racism and bias is stereotyping and insecurity and jealousy. If a Black person is poor, they fit the stereotype, and white America is comfortable, but a prosperous Black person make people feel threatened and jealous. And so they feel that you don't deserve to have more than, they do. And so the first conclusion is that you must have, obtained it illegally. Now, again, this is a long question, so I want to narrow it to the question of stereotypes. Dave, I see you shaking your head vigorously. You can go first.
Well, thanks. Well, look, a racial stereotype, it's an exaggerated mental picture that somebody holds against a particular racial group. It's a preconceived notion that surmises somebody's behavior and status. It assumes the assumptions out of it are made out of ignorance, not having education on that particular individual's culture, or not even them as a person. So the type of person that holds a racial bias based on their internal belief is actually going to discard any actual facts that may be consistent with beliefs that are actually about that particular culture. So how does somebody even develop this, is what I was thinking, is that it comes from trying to make the complex simpler, is really what this is happening here. It's when we're young, we're taught to categorize things. But the problem with that is that when we start to categorize things, we lose the values over those particular categories. So we're also, when we're not familiar with a particular group, it's because we haven't been associated with that group. And so all of a sudden those beliefs become hardened. Holding on to negative feelings is really kind of based upon the unknown, is what I'm thinking. So overcoming a negative stereotype, I would think maybe the first thing is to be self-aware of our inner thoughts and feelings. Yeah, we're all humans. We make mistakes. Bob, thank you for your honesty. We're human. We learn as we grow, just like Bob just said. The failure here is actually when we don't recognize the need for us to be able to change. Mm-hmm. And then we don't take an action on that. The second thing is that we have to take the time to digest the facts about other people. You change by being around people who are not like you. Guess what? If you start doing that, something's going to change inside of you. So by doing that, we actually expose that predetermined mindset that we have to actual facts about another human being. How about that? And that actually disrupts predetermined patterns that we may have based upon things that are actually inside of our head. So actually by doing this, and I know I'm preaching here, Gloria, I'm sorry, but by doing this, we could actually be a conduit, educating other people who actually see us make that change, who People that may hold on to stereotypes, and they see different language then coming out of us. They see different treatment then coming out of us. And we have the ability, just based upon our action, to elicit change in other people.
Thank you, Dave. I am writing furiously because in some of the conversations I'm listening to, both you and many of the panelists, I'm even beginning to hear solutions. And we're, pulling together all these solutions. From every show, we're gathering together the solutions. Thank you for that comment. I would ask you to chime in. Go ahead and chime in, Jason. What are your thoughts around stereotyping and how that has contributed to this problem?
Well, I think it comes from a lack of empathy, for one, and understanding that people come from different backgrounds, socioeconomic, education, cultures, and for me, I've been very fortunate. I work for a big corporation, same one for 23 years, give or take. And I've had people from all over the world. I've managed teams not only here in the United States, but across the globe, in other countries. So for us to understand that everyone has the dignity of self and dignity of worth, that's a Christian principle, then we have to, that's how we start. But if we don't have that, if we always have the blinders on, yeah, we're going to have those biases and the prejudices, and, and if we don't, talk to folks that are not in the same circles or like us, yeah, we're not going to have that frame of reference, so, I've been very, very fortunate and blessed, to work with folks, not only work, but with the Faith and Freedom Coalition, and, my circles in Delaware, and even now starting here in Florida, different folks of different cultures and backgrounds. And that's how we change, and that's why we have a frame of reference and overcome that.
Thank you, Jason. I would ask you to chime in, Bob, in case we don't get to all the my Black brothers here. I want you to chime in, Bob.
I definitely believe that there's just going to be general. There's problems in this world, and we definitely need to find a way to change it. Are there stereotypes? There absolutely. My dad was not the best influence on me when it comes to race relations, and I'm sure that's the fact with a lot of white men that are my age. 1976. I mean, wasn't that long ago when I saw a video of this family trying to move into a neighborhood, and the white people didn't want them there. So we grew up, I don't want to say trained, that doesn't sound right, but groomed a certain way by the people who grew up in the 50s and the 60s. Thank God my mom wasn't like that, but you have your father who you look up to, who's uses the N-word, encourages you to laugh and tell jokes. And I'm 54, so I can't be the only white guy in America that had the same thought process growing up as we were younger. And it just, I can only speak for me personally, nobody else. It took God to change me, so maybe that's what it's going to take for everybody. But we were definitely raised not by my mother, in case she's watching, because of my mother, but to definitely think of Black people as secondary citizens. I mean, there's no doubt about it. My kids know better. I raised them differently than my dad. The N-word does not come into this house. Whether it's which form that they'd like to try to use, even when their friends are over here who majority are Black, we don't allow it, even in a joking manner. So in that sense, I broke that generation. So my generation, I didn't raise my 4 sons the way that my dad influenced me at such a young age. So I think that's a start. And now them raising their children, the next generation and the next generation. But that's the way it's going to, in my opinion, to get to where we're all just treated equally. And, but it does begin with God. So.
Absolutely. Again, thank you, Bob. Your honesty around these issues is quite refreshing. And every time that you participate, I enjoy hearing that, because that's really what is going to help us heal. Honesty and truthfulness. And you've shared, and you're right. There's some multitude of people out there around your age who feel the same way, who were raised the same way. And to know that if God moved you to where you are now, where you see these things as wrong, God is the change that we're looking for. in our hearts. If we let him in and let the sunshine come in, he would make a way. Okay, I'm going to open this up to my, Black brothers. If anybody wants to chime in, as you see, we're getting close to time, but I wanted to give an opportunity to our white brothers to speak. So whoever who wants to go, you can chime in now.
I'll start. First, before time runs out, I just want to say, Bob, it takes a certain amount of bravery to do what he's doing right now, because he could literally be ostracized right now for what he says. But I think the Bobs of the world are the most important people we need today, because we need guys like him. Because the reality is, he's absolutely right. He was raised in a system. He was raised to think a certain way. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people. We can look at all the videos from the MLK marches and everything. There were a lot of young people screaming at them that were 12 or whatever years old. Guess how old they are today?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, some have changed. Some have grown out of the system that they were raised into. And we need to support them and not ostracize them, because I think with social media and the way it is, they find stuff that they said 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and is automatically, look at this racist, he's the worst. And that may be far from the truth. Yeah, he grew up in a system where he was, and Bob said it, I grew up in a system where it was okay to condemn these people. But that's not who I am now. And I think we need to be careful about going so far back and saying, look who this person is, and saying, okay, who is this person today? What is he doing today? Yes, he grew up in a system where it was okay, because we all know, look, the 50s, 60s, 70s, that's not that far away. It really isn't. But what are these people doing today? And Bob, I just want to personally say thank you, because the bravery that it took for you to do what you did today is welcomed, needed, and I'll support you 100%. I know you. We've spoken plenty of time. But if anybody has anything to say about you, call me. I got your back, buddy. I got your back, because it takes a certain amount of bravery to do what you did. And those are the partnerships that we need. Those are the things that we need to make a change and make a difference in this world.
I completely agree. And there you have it, Bob. You have brother saying, I'm going to fight with you. Go ahead.
It's always good to have a guy that's big on your side, so I'll take it.
Absolutely. And even on that point, yes, one of the things that Bob said that really struck me was that he said he broke that pattern. Think about it. This was how he raised, but he's not raising his children that way. So I'm writing all these things down. These are solutions. We're looking for solutions. And that's definitely a solution. The way you were raised might be the reason why you are the way you are, but that should not be the excuse that you stay that way. You can stop being that way. God can change your heart. And then you can also be a change agent and make sure your children grow up differently. So I'm always having an ear for the solutions. And that's definitely one solution that everybody listening to us today can implement. I am going to ask my Black brothers to chime in here. There's one last question I'm hoping that we can grab real quick before we end. The question from our audience is, how do we help Black young people to protect themselves from this danger? What are your thoughts? Andre, go ahead. I know Lewis is getting ready, but Andre, chime in there.
Go ahead, Brandon. You about to
Brandon, Brandon, go.
No, this is just a joke. I'm just messing with him. I think it's, once again, this is something that most of us as a Black parent, this is what we've been doing for our kids all along, is just educating them in the world in which that they live. And so nothing is going to change from that point. This is almost, it's a question directed to Black parents, but it's almost a question that really needs to be answered by most of our white brothers and sisters out there, to change how our children are being looked at in public, So, growing up, I always understood where I should be, where I shouldn't be, what to say, what I shouldn't say, how to respect authority. I mean, these are all things that we should know, but it's brought to another level because we've understood that one mistake could cost you your life. It's crazy when you see on social media now, people are putting out posts, here's how you should learn to ease your breathing in case a cop has their knee on your back. Here's how you should loosen your body, if you're under attack. Here's the numbers you need to have in your phone to be ready to call, or when you get pulled over, people who have cameras in their car now, just in order to get things on tape, just in case something happens. These are all things that are very troublesome, but at the same time, it's things that we're going to continue to encourage in our kids. We are going to break down the stereotypes by, even though the kids are not learning these things in school, you have the one Black History Month, which is the shortest month of the year, that they're teaching the kids about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, and that's all they ever hear about. So it's been our job to continue to educate them on other great Black leaders throughout our history, like a Katherine Johnson, a Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson. These are people who, mathematicians who helped get John Glenn into space, that you don't hear about. And if it wasn't for movies like Hidden Figures being able to bring out these little known facts, we would never know that we had a part in history, in our American history. So to be able to continue to educate our kids on that, to demand diversity and inclusion throughout our education system, these are the things that we need to continue to do to let our children know that we are fighting for them, that we are going to do everything we can possible to try to make the world a better place for them. And that's what I look forward to, and I look forward to seeing, once again, as Brandon had mentioned earlier, is teaching them who they are. So no matter what anyone says against them, no matter what slur they use, no matter what they say, they understand the value that they have. They understand the uniqueness in which God has created them, and they know that they are covered by His grace, His mercy, and His blood. And when they know those things, they will have that confidence to be able to walk boldly, to be able to walk with their chin up, no matter where they go, and to be able to be a voice for the voiceless. Even if they are the only ones who look like them in certain situations, they won't be afraid to speak up for what they know is right and what they've been taught. And we're not going to leave that for anybody else to teach them. That's our responsibility, and we're going to do that and allow them to have a voice as well, that they can share that with their friends.
Thank you, Andre. I'm going to ask Brandon, and you guys, you want to chime in there. We're running close to time, but this is important. Brandon, chime in.
So, Andre, you literally took everything I was about to say right out of my mouth, man. You should have let me go first. No, I'm just playing. No, but seriously, man, I think, man, it's so pivotal. To really, I can't. There's no other way to get around it. You have to know whose you are, man. It's so key. My mom, kudos to my mom. She was African American woman, and she was a single parent with 5 kids. So the grind was real. So a lot of situations that a lot of people don't encounter. I've experienced so many different things, and I don't put that on blast. There's no need for me to do that, but it has been a molding, definitely a hand in the molding of who I am today. But those things do not define me. So being placed in a stereotype is a easy pet peeve of mine, because something I firmly believe in with the previous job that I was at, that your future does not dictate, or your past does not dictate your future. No matter where you came from, how people treat you, it doesn't need to determine who you are destined to be. We serve a mighty God who has claimed you as His son or daughter, and it's our free will that we decide to follow Christ in order to walk in that obedience. I think that is so pivotal. But as to what we all are saying, I think it is very important for, as parents, I'm a parent of 3. I'm actually in a blended family. My wife is fully Caucasian. She had a son before we got married who was Caucasian. I take him in as my own. Again, as I stated, the first thing I stated was that I come from a interracial family all over, cousins, uncle, everything is deep. So kind of coming from that perspective, those stereotypes, it's just baffling. It's, I think, to what people were saying before, is that, it comes from what has happened and what's being taught, what is being taught. And I think it is part of us as parents, even as this generation, my age, I'm 31, but the generations that do have these children that are coming up in the next, I think it's all of our obligation to be able to teach them, to get out of that, to break the generational curses. Just as Bob was saying in his household, how he teaches his kids to go against what he was taught. That's what it's about, man. That's how the devil will and does move throughout time. He's using the same schemes and same tricks. It's just a different presentation. So, but the whole goal is to separate, and that's not what it is. And again, I think that falls into that stereotype question, because there's only a stereotype because you haven't experienced or you're just not aware. But I say, as myself, again, I know whose I am. So when those situations come to me, I welcome it fully, because I know I'm not like the stereotype. I'm not like your regular. And as you said, Gloria, I believe that because we are a child of God, it is also our obligation to shine the light. And it's our obligation, whether it's as African Americans, as Black people, to be able to be different than what people have been generationally cursed by here. You know what I mean? I think we can't expect them to just understand. It comes through conversation. It comes through relationship. It comes down to encounter. Again, there's so many different things you can go into that, but I think it's truly our job, as Black people, to shine a light and to be different and to put the stereotype to rest. That way, by majority, you know what I mean, it can be dismayed. Now, is that going to be easy? No. And is it going to be done tomorrow? No. But again, the other part of that is by us as parents, we're raising our children to be different and not follow what people conceive in their minds have been placed there or whatever. It's our job, and through that is only through the light of Christ, man. So again, I think that's just my life at this point, is to be obedient and to not be ashamed. As Jay was saying, to be able to go boldly no matter where you are, because you know whose you are. You know what I mean?
Amen. Absolutely. Know who you are, know whose you are. And if there's a stereotype in operation, make sure that you don't fit that stereotype. Break the mold so that when they meet you, they know that there's one Black person who doesn't fit that mold. And if one is out there, there are more that don't fit that mold. Louis and Timothy, I'm going to ask you if you have something that's real quick to chime in. We are over the 1 hour mark, and I don't like to do that. But I wanted to make sure that these voices come forth. So if you have, Timothy, you don't have a baby yet, so maybe Louis can chime in.
I'm actually going to leave that question where it was. It was answered completely. Okay. I'm going to actually finish off with a solution for everybody. Okay. After 9/11, because I was in the tri-state area, we had a slogan, "See something, say something," for security reasons. This could be applied towards this situation as well. And even women's right could be applied to this, because it's kind of the same concept here. So if you're in a store and you see security following a Black person, ask them why. Put it out there. If you see a Black person complaining because of security, stand with that Black person. Don't assume that they need to be followed. How about you stand with that Black person and ask why? Because the truth is, if a white person jumps in on the side of that Black person, it does change dynamics. It does make a difference. And see something, start opening your eyes and seeing it from a different perspective. Instead of just assuming that that person is just an angry Black person, how about you actually have some empathy and side with them and say, you know what, I'm with you. What is going on? Why are you harassing this person? If you see a joke being made in the workplace, say something. It's just that simple.
Amen. Thank you so much. Timmy, do you have any last words? Or have they said everything you wanted to say?
I think everything's been said that can be said. So.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good answer. Folks, again, thank you so much. Great conversation today. To God be the glory. I bless all of you. And to that last point that was made by Lewis and also was made earlier by Bob and all that, I wanted to really commend Becky Stilwell. Becky stood up and wrote a long, essay on Facebook, saying, stating her concerns about some of these issues. And I saw some comments that were really vicious. They were targeted against her. So, for saying these things, you can become a target. Unfortunately, there are people who are angry and people who are vicious, and some, bad words were really hurtful words were spoken against her. But again, unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. But thank you again for shining the light there. Thank you for the dialogue today. We are going to continue. I'm compiling a list of all the solutions that we are pulling together to be in. And then at the end, we're going to talk about those solutions and how to implement them. Thank you, my brothers, both white and black. God bless you. Thank you for all those who are watching us. Continue to send your comments. Continue to send us your questions. Continue to be a part of this conversation. We had so many comments, there's no way I can integrate them here. But like we did today, we'll go back and review them, grab your questions, and make it part of our next conversation. To everyone, thank you, and to God Almighty be all the glory. I thank God that we have the kind of men that we have on this conversation today. And I thank God that we have the kind of young people who are out there showing us by their example the type of America that they want to grow up in and the type of America that they want to raise their children in. God bless you, and God bless these United States. Good night, and God bless you. Bye-bye.